light turns green, I hit the gas pedal and I just hear this horrendous whoosh behind me. And once you've heard it, there's no other sound that when your engine fire happens in the back. It is very, very noticeable. And then I had an 89 Weekender that I drove for a little over a decade, and brought that to Oregon with me, and that caught on fire. Not in the engine, but the dash, and everything kind of melted together, and I taped it all up and everything still worked. And I drove it like that for another, I don't know, 5, 6, 7,000 miles. And then I traded that for my first split window to a guy in Eugene, and I had a 65 built by the Alabama Camper Company, and I ended up trading that to a guy in Ohio, and that's the one that Ed Edwards was doing all the metal work for me, and I had bought a couple $1,000s worth of metal and already started paying him to cut out everything. And I bought a 66, another 66 sealing wax, red and white. Yeah, so then right in the middle of all that metal work, I told Ed to stop when I got a text message from a buddy at church that said he had seen this thing on his daily drive at work and sent me a text message with the picture of the front of this thing, and it's the bus I've wanted my whole life. So 2014 I bought this, so I've had it a decade now, and I've put at least 100,000 miles on it. I had a couple different Toyota FJ40s, 78 and a 66 actually, and so that's kind of been my year. 66 has been kind of, yeah, it's kind of been the year of all of these things. So, and then like I said, I got this one a decade ago and never looked back. When I got it, it was empty. It was just an empty shell with a rusted out back seat that I traded Ed Edwards for. I got my Safari windows installed, and that was the first thing I spent money on with this bus. Was it didn't have Safari, so that was the first thing I bought. And they don't get closed very much. Oh, here, to put my Safari windows in. He installed my Safari windows, and I gave him that old rusty back seat for a PGSG palm green sand green bus that he had, and in his shop, and was trying to get back on the road, and he needed a seat frame. So I said, if it's worth it for you, it's worth it for me, man. So I got my Safari, rebuilt my whole front beam, refreshed the disc brakes that I had already bought from him, rebuilt all the bushings, redid everything on the front beam that way, did 2.5-inch drop spindle welded instead of the flip spindles, so now it actually drives and doesn't track all over the place and bump, stop, and steer all over like it used for, it did for the first 7 years that I had it. And now the IRS is wonderful, and even with my broken back now, I've learned over this last 10 years that I can have the motor out on my own within 30 minutes, and then the transmission's only another 20 minutes behind that, because once you got the motor out, the IRS transmission, it's 10 CV bolts, or that's all you're doing is loosening 10 CV bolts, pop off the axles, 2 transmission mount bolt, 4 transmission mount bolts, rip that sucker out of there and stick another one in. And so yeah, and then when we moved to Oregon, really, and I had this bus, that's kind of when I started hanging out with people after this bus caught on fire. Like, I was always into Volkswagens. This is the bus I've wanted since I was 6 years old. The color, the rack, the rims, the whole thing. My wife is always telling me, why didn't you get into these things when they were a lot more affordable? And I'm like, I don't know. I was having kids and young kids, and it just didn't seem like it was practical. We didn't have extra money laying around for me to have project stuff. So until we moved here, and I had the chance to get them. Yeah, so this bus has been, it's life-changing from that standpoint. I went from not hanging out with a bunch of, as I like to call them, my hippie heathen Volkswagen friends, right? And all of a sudden, I can't imagine life without this bus, and without the culture, and without the people that I met through it. And literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people in relationships and conversations that I've had with people in the last decade because of this silly old Volkswagen bus that everybody likes and wants to wave at. And for me, just speaking to that waving thing with the pain that I live in is this, for some reason, this old bus is, I know it's mostly mental, but it's okay if it's mental, that I can drive this thing way further than I can drive any other car, because nobody waves at me in my wife's minivan. And so when I'm driving this, however, I'm constantly on the lookout for somebody waving or flashing their lights or something. Being aware of that constantly is a thing that I've learned when I was coming off of a lifetime of opiates, trying to control my pain. I had to kind of figure a way to distract myself, and that was one way to distract myself, was being acknowledgement of all these other people wanting to acknowledge my car. Not in a prideful way, but just like, hey, if you acknowledge me, I want to wave back at you, right? And like I said, when I drive my wife's minivan and nobody's waving at me, my back just hurts all the time, because I'm not able to think that way. You just kind of settle into a normal car. Normal cars are boring. That's what I say. Normal cars suck. And then I've always wanted this velvet green color, because it's a 2-year only color, and there's not all that many of them around, and for the Splitty anyways. And Robert Floyd, I think it is, in Arizona, said the other day, and I told him I was gonna steal it, the velvet green is the fastest color. Because I said Velvet Green Mafia, and he goes, yeah, velvet green's the fastest color. I go, I'm stealing that, dude. But I'm pretty sure it was Robert Floyd that told me that. But because I spent a lot of time on the couch in pain and not being able to kind of interact with the world at work in normal settings, I use social media and those friendships that I've been building year after year, and I use Facebook and Instagram and those kinds of things, or at least try all the time to use it in a healthy way, to stay in contact with people and acknowledge the things that are going on in their lives and comment on them, and then that kind of helps me look forward to the next time I actually get to spend one-on-one personal time like this with somebody, versus only being through social media, right? I don't get groceries or go get to the gas station without a fire extinguisher in my car, especially after living through it. But what caused my fire was the brass plug on the bottom of the carburetor bowl came out somehow, some way, and dumped the bowl right onto the distributor, and flames. And I did have a plastic fuel filter in there, but that wasn't the cause of the fire. But the fire was burning on it, and it melted 2 tiny little holes. And even though I had turned the key off, I had a full tank of gas, and I was angled down, and that mechanical pump will just keep going up and down if there's an opening, and it was just going psst, 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 and just kept feeding my fire. And as my extinguisher was running out, oh, by the way, my 3-year-old daughter was in the front seat when the bus caught on fire, in her car seat right here, strapped up front. And we were almost home. I picked her up from daycare, and she was 3, and we were almost home. We were right in front of our church building where my wife was inside working, and my little girl says, it smells like gas. And I said, yeah, I know, we're almost home, honey. It's like 2 blocks. The light turns green. I hit the gas pedal, and I just hear this horrendous whoosh behind me. And once you've heard it, there's no other sound. That when your engine fire happens in the back, it is very, very noticeable. I ran around the back of the bus, and I opened up the lid, and flames just shot out. And I realized I got to get my daughter out of this car. She's way more important. So I got her out of her car seat, and I turned around, and some old lady had stopped and said, send her to me, send her to me. So I said, honey, daddy needs to put the fire out, go to that old lady. And she's like, okay. She's just a kid, right? So she just hobbles across the street to this old lady to pick her up and hold on to her, while I'm back there terrified that my bus that I've wanted my whole life is going down in flames. And just as my extinguisher is about to run out, a man, it was a trucker, came up behind me on the phone with 911 and said, I got the fire department coming, and I have an extinguisher, but if you don't find something to cut that or to block that fuel line off, you're going to lose this thing. Ran in here and started throwing tools everywhere, trying to find some kind of clamp. And I finally found some vice grips down on the fuel line, and that cut the fuel problem off. And at that point, it was all under control, and it went from 0 to 100 in your brain, probably 3 minutes. of terror. So yeah, she's 12 now, almost 13. She likes to bring it up like in line at the grocery store. Hey Dad, remember when your bus caught on fire? Just to see what people say, because she just thinks it's a funny story. So we survived that. And like I said, I towed it to Derek's shop. I called him and I said, hey, my bus just caught on fire. He goes, that's not funny. I went, you're right, it wasn't. He's like, holy crap. And I called my wife, working in the church. Babe, I need you out front. Why? My bus just caught on fire. That's not funny. You're right, it wasn't. And so then one of my friends, Tim, was driving the fire truck, and he rolled up and he goes, I heard Volkswagen. And I thought, oh no, it's Chad. And I went, yeah, thanks for hurrying. I said, the fire's been out for 5 minutes. I said, if I'd have been waiting for you guys, this thing would have been gone, Anyways, point is now behind my front seat is a fire extinguisher, a pair of gloves so I don't burn my hand again, and inside of those gloves is a fuel clamp. So as soon as I get that engine deck lid open, I can reach in there, clamp the fuel line off, and that will kill most of the fire's problems that people experience. As long as it's the inlet, as long as you're clamping the right fuel line, right? So clamp the right fuel line, most of your fire problems stop. And now you can just deal with what's burning on top. So I've told lots of people that story, and I know lots of people who have said that's a great idea and started doing similar things and planning ahead. And I always told my kids and other people, I said, the cheapest lesson you can learn is through someone else's experience, right? And so, literally I towed the bus to Derek's shop. We put on some new hoses and wires, and I drove it to an hour south to Eugene, Oregon for a car show. The next day with all the black showing on the back of the vents and everything, and I actually really wanted to clear coat over it and keep it as a part of the story to the bus, but people kept walking up to it at the car show and wiping their finger through it. What's this? And I'm like, well, now it's screwed. Now I'd have to go back with a torch to make it look so then I left it for a long time, and I finally washed it off. But anyways, because to me it's part of the story. It's like the vents that are cut out on the side of my bus. There's no logic to it that we've been able to figure out at all, and I haven't gotten the history on it, but it didn't bother me enough to fix it either, because it's part of the bus's story.
Mm-hmm.
I am. And I've had more than one person try to buy this off me. I literally had 3 people arguing in an AMP parking lot, trying to buy it off me, and I kept saying, guys, I'm not selling it. I have no intention of selling this. You mean you wouldn't take $25,000? I'm like, no, it's the bus I've wanted my whole life, and I've made it for what it is. No, I'm not interested in selling it. And this guy literally pulls a wad of cash out of his pocket, and he goes, that's $35,000. Take it or leave it. And I go, I leave it. He goes, you dumb mother. And I went, you can't tell my wife that I said no. And I said, but if you're the idiot that's pulling $35,000 out of your pocket in an AMP parking lot in Salem, that's pretty ballsy. And I go, but no, you can stick it back in your pocket. It ain't for sale. And he was like, whoa. And I go, dude, I love this thing. This dumb vehicle brings me so much joy. And just driving it to the grocery store makes my day, because somebody's going to wave at me, somebody's going to appreciate it. Or, that old saying, if you don't look back at your car when you walk away from it, you're not driving the right car. How many times have we looked back at our cars and taken a picture of it just because there's like, ooh, that's kind of a cool sign or something.
Every other day at least.
It's like when people come up, is it okay if I take a picture of your car? I'm like, yeah, I take lots of them. And then after they start taking pictures, I go, oh, but it is $5 a picture. I have more than one time walked up to my bus and had some girl standing in front of it, sticking her butt out for Instagram, and somebody's there taking pictures for her, and I just sit and giggle, that my bus is being used as a backdrop for stuff like that. And, but again, it brings joy to me, and it brings joy to, other people.